Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Thank you so much for listening with us today. The holidays are here, Thanksgiving just a couple weeks away, and that means food, lots and lots of food. That means family. That means behaviors. That means saying things, doing things that we might regret for the entire year. It's that time of year when families get together and, you know, you've got that one uncle or aunt that's going to say that thing that they always say. Our guest in studio today is returning to talk with us, Dr. Kyra Bobinet. Now, Dr. Bobinet is CEO of Engaged In, a design firm that uses neuroscience to change behavior. And for her work in behavioral science, she's received the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health Innovator Award. And she's also a published author, the author of Well-Designed Life, 10 Lessons in Brain Science and Design Thinking for Mindful, Healthy, and Purposeful Life. And she's here today to talk with us about how we don't necessarily have to gain all that weight. We don't necessarily have to say that thing or do that thing that we do every time we get together for the holidays. How are you doing today, Dr. Bobinet?
I'm doing well, Neal. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanksgiving, Christmas, here we are. It's time to eat, gather with people that you haven't seen for a year at least, and try to act like everything's okay when sometimes it may not be okay. How do we combat it this year? We've tried so many years before. What's going to be different this year?
Well, I think, for sure we need to apply behavior design to things we would prefer to do versus things we would hope not to do. And one way to do that is to leverage what we know about the fast brain and slow brain. Mm-hmm. So, fast brain is everything we will do habitually, and slow brain is things that we idealize that we would do, that we want to do, that we wish to do differently. And so, we have to set up our environment and reminders and, kind of a support system so that we go with what is on their slow brain and we prevent our fast brain from running the show.
So this fast brain, slow brain concept that you're talking about, when it comes, time to gather around the Thanksgiving dinner table with family, is it the fast brain that says, I want both the legs?
Most definitely, and fights other people for them. In fact, yes. So, our fast brain, if left to run the show, will cause us to have regret. It will cause us to overeat, like you mentioned, say things that we may not want to say, those kinds of things, just because we are trying to get the fastest distance between A and B, or the plate of food into our stomach. And a lot of us look forward to that. I personally was raised in a family where it was an eating competition, is what it was kind of thought of. And so, the way to do this differently is, beforehand, when you've had a good meal and you want to think through, how do we want to make things differently? How do I want to keep from gaining weight? Because, it's really important right now to prevent weight gain, because how people gain weight over the years is that they keep about 1 to 2 pounds each year net from the holidays, the season of carbs, right? So, and these exact carbs are the ones driving belly fat, which we know scientifically are different kind of fat cells than other fat cells. They're hungrier. And the more belly fat cells we have, the more it makes it difficult for our brains to ignore cravings, cravings specifically for fat and sugar. And so it just sets up a real spiral of being out of control. And that's how you get 20 pounds overweight over 10 years is, 1 to 2 pounds a year. And it's better and more effective to control, to either moderate something during the holiday season than to have the best intentions after the new year.
Now, you mentioned regret, remorse, basically guilt. You're sitting down at the table, you've had too much to eat, you've had too much to eat, and you've got that physical feeling of I've had too much to eat. Are we talking about a physical manifestation that causes guilt and remorse, or is this an actual mental thing, whereas even if we didn't feel the physical effects of eating too much, just sitting there for an extended amount of time, are we talking mental guilt or physical guilt or a combination of the two?
I think it's more social. I mean, if you think about animals, lions will engorge themselves and then they'll lay there in the sun for a good 24, 40 hours because they don't have a meal that often. And so if we are evolving from ancestors who succeeded and survived from other people by having these binges or eating whatever they could whenever they got it, they survived versus other people starved, so it kind of, we're descendants of people who overindulged and ate food when they had it. Now, the problem is that now we're surrounded by too much food, and we have to reverse engineer that and figure out a way to satisfy our brains and organize it so that we trick ourselves, we trick our brains while still not going past that point. And then, we're not as active as our ancestors were either. We're not walking, 20 miles a day trying to look for food. So we have to figure out how to modify for what our energy outputs are. And a good way to do that is to just, design for tricking the brain. You can do things using bulk. You can do things using, distance from the table, sizes of dishes, sizes of spoons, substituting different things that kind of give the same texture that, we're used to, that make Thanksgiving or Christmas, those kinds of meals.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking about the science of restaurant design and the way that a restaurant operates. The meal is started in a certain way. Your order is taken in a certain way. They bring the bread out at a certain time. Are all of these things deliberate? And are you talking about, say, maybe doing something in contradiction to this when you're at home in order to better your health or not eat so much? You talked about bulk. You talked about distance from the table. What about tricking the brain, and not having to move away from the table, maybe starting the meal in a different way?
Exactly. I mean, I love the metaphor of restaurant design because it's exactly this type of thing that we want people to think about differently. It's not about willpower. Willpower and motivation are what I call small muscle groups. They will give way to the big muscle groups, which is the craving, the addict, the inner addict, the person who looks forward to engorging themselves. So why don't we just go with where we're going to go, and just embrace that and say, okay, I'm going to put some friction in between you and that over-distended stomach, so I'll give you carrots and celery as your dippers instead of chips. Or if I give you chips, I'm going to give you, some different types of chips, maybe some whole grain chips or something that you're not going to just down in handfuls and not feel full.
Okay, something that doesn't feel just so wonderfully familiar that, a handful of it and you're ready to roll.
It's similar because what you want to do is match what the brain is expecting. There's a lot of failed attempts at this when people try to do a healthy, quote unquote, healthy Thanksgiving. I think very few people would find that satisfying. But for example, if you use Smart Balance or an olive oil based butter substitute in your mashed potatoes, if you add in some cauliflower and parsnip for bulk and you still achieve the same texture and an approximate taste, then you're tricking the brain, but you're also preventing yourself from overdoing it.
Okay. Now, when it comes to tricking the brain, I've been told that I'm a very, very slow eater. I don't
You're
know
lucky.
I don't know if I'm taking, 100 bites or not, but, growing up, 100 bites, chew your food, 100, whatever. Taking less bites during a meal, can that trick the brain into thinking you're full because you're taking less bites? All of these little things seem to be to go at least toward that end.
Exactly. And this is why I focus on think like a designer, and the solution that you come up with will fit you. Because for you're in the minority of people who eat slow and take a lot of, chew a lot. That most people who are prone to weight gain tend to race the food down their, mouth and into their stomach in order to get that stretchy feeling as soon as possible. Well, the biochemical aspect of that is that the stretchy feeling doesn't register at the brain for another 20 minutes. So you've got 20 minutes of engorging before, your stomach catches up with your brain. So that is why I think people should say, okay, who am I? What does my family do? Are we all about seconds or thirds? So if that's the case for my family, I'll put the food off the table except for the veggies and turkey and have it on a sideboard or even in another room or on an island or something like that where somebody actually has to get up to go make a spectacle of themselves, get another plate of food, and then sit down, right? So just that little bit of pause, that little bit of friction helps to control their behavior, helps them to be more sober to what they actually want to do.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about your book, Well-Designed Life, 10 Lessons in Brain Science and Design Thinking for a Mindful, Healthy, and Purposeful Life. Now, where can we get a copy of this book?
Yes, it's on Amazon, on Kindle and paperback. And you also can go to our website, designyourbehavior.com.
Okay. And in your book, Well-Designed Life, how much does your book address design thinking, specifically design thinking for overeating?
It's the main topic of every, not eating, but, you can apply it to eating, every single concept in every one of the chapters. And then there's specific examples around eating, around my own addiction to things like soy chai and things that I've struggled with, and showing the patterns of how you design for that, design your way out of that problem.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with Dr. Kyra Bobinet. And she's got 5 words of advice for anyone engaging in bettering their health. Be careful, authentic, and useful. Now, as a national speaker and author and CEO founder of Engaged In, a neuroscience behavior design firm, she devotes her life to cracking the code of why we engage in our health. And every day she and her team use neuroscience to make products and communications much more engaging. And we've been here talking about some of the ways that we can avoid that huge belly just after the holidays, wondering, what happened? I was so svelte yesterday. It's been great having you here with us today, Kyra.
You too, Neal. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for returning. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.